I got to deliver the information. All right. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you guys to two new concepts here. First of all, let's talk about compound probabilities. Compound means more than one and being put together. So, if you're looking at two different probabilities, you want to find the probability that they would happen together, all you have to do is multiply. So, that's what this verbiage up here says. It says, if the probability of event A is P of A, and the probability of event B is P of B, then the probability that both events will occur is P of B times P of A. So here's a word problem to kind of give it some more substance. If there's a 40% chance of rain today and a 50% chance of rain tomorrow, the chances of it raining on both days is, multiply them. 40% in decimals is 0.4, and 50% in decimals is 0.5. So if you multiply those, you get 0.2. And then if you change it to a percent, it becomes 20%. Okay? So if you want to find probability of two things happening together, you got to multiply them both. That's called a compound probability. All right, complement. Complement is the opposite. It's the probability that something won't happen. So, for example, let's take a look at example 1 there. It says, if there's a 20% chance of rain tomorrow, then there's a 80% chance it won't. Right? How do you do that? Well, for percents, you just subtract it from 100. So if there's a 20% chance that it will rain, subtract that from 100, which is 80, to find the chances that it won't rain. Right? That's called the complement. They're complements of each other, opposites. All right, now, we also have to look at fractions, though. I'm introducing to you guys now for the first time in this unit, looking at probability as a percent. We just haven't been doing that. We've been working with fractions because that's the easiest way to do it for what we've been doing so far. But you can do percents. But let's go back to fractions for a second. How do you find the complement of a fraction? Well, let's take a look at example 2. If there's a 1 in 4 chance of winning a game, what's the complement of that? 3/4. How do you do that? Well, the rule up here is for fractions, to find the complement, you just subtract it from 1. Now that's a little bit harder to do. Like, what's 1 minus 1/4? So I'll give you guys a little bit easier way to find a complement than that. It's more like a trick, really. 1/4. All right, so subtract those two numbers, 1 and 4. What is it? 3, and then keep the bottom the same. The reason why that works is because the two top numbers have to add to make the bottom. So those are complements of each other. Move on. So we're about ready to do some example problems that put these two things together. Multiplication of probabilities with complements. Let's go ahead and see how this comes together. Example 3. Suppose there's a 1 in 2 chance that Alice will ask you to be her boyfriend. And a 2 in 3 chance that Jenny will ask you to be her boyfriend. So the first question we're being asked is, what's the probability that Jenny will ask you but Alice will not? So for these problems, I like to do a little table. You don't have to do the table if you don't want to. I like it, though, because it kind of gives me all the numbers I need up front. But the word problem doesn't give you the numbers up front necessarily. First of all, we're dealing with two girls, Alice and Jenny, right? And what the word problem tells us is the probability that they will ask. So I'm going to put will here. But what the problem doesn't give us is, what's the probability that they won't ask? And that's the part I need to figure out before I begin. So, what's the probability that Alice will ask us according to the word problem? Well, I'm going to stick with fractions, so it's 1/2. And what's the probability that Jenny will? 2/3. Now let's find the probability that they won't. What's the probability that Alice won't? We'll just subtract the 1/2 from 1. And for Jenny, the probability that she won't, if you find the complement, it's 1/3. Now, by doing that, I have all the information I need to answer the questions below. I just need to pick what two numbers I'm using for each problem and then multiply them. Okay, so they're asking, what's the probability that Jenny will ask you, right? But Alice will not. So there's the two numbers. They want to know what's probabilities two things happening together. So what do you do when you have two probabilities that you want to happen together? You multiply them. So it's going to be 1/2 multiplied with 2/3. And so what you're going to get is 2/6 or 1/3. You can also reduce before you begin, like these 2's. Just cross them out. Doesn't matter how you reduce. But there's a 1 in 3 chance that that'll happen. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Part B. Part B is asking, what's the probability that neither girl will ask you? Well, that means we have to look at Alice not asking us and Jenny not asking us. So what's the probability that Alice won't ask us? So 1.5 chance that she won't. And what's the probability that that Jenny won't ask us? 1/3. And the probability of those happening together is 1/6. Multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is 6. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 2. Number 2 is different because there's percentages in there. Number 2, suppose there's a 20% chance of rain in Lancaster and a 10% chance of rain in Palmdale. So I'm going to start with my box. So we have Lancaster, we've got Palmdale, we have will, and we have won't, as in it will rain or it won't rain. So now when you're working with the percentages, you got to remember to change them into decimals. So if there's a 20% chance of rain in Lancaster, we're going to put under will rain in Lancaster 0.20. And a 10% chance of rain in Palmdale, which would be 0.1. Now we got to find the complements. So what's the probability that it won't rain in Lancaster? 0.80. And the probability that it won't rain in Palmdale? 0.90. And now we're prepared to go ahead and answer these questions. So what's the probability that it will rain in Lancaster but not in Palmdale? So for Lancaster it's 20, but not in Palmdale is 90 for 0.1800. And if we change that to a percentage, what would it be? 18%. You just move the decimal over twice. All right. Part B. What is the probability that it will not rain in Palmdale? It's just 90, right? It's already in the table for us. There's no work to do. And what's the probability that it will rain in neither city? Yeah, so we have to find the probability that it won't rain in Lancaster, which is 80, and the probability that it won't rain in Palmdale, which is 90, which gives us 0.7200. Move the decimal twice, and we get 72%. So that's pretty good odds that it won't rain if those numbers were correct. Here's some for you guys. Okay, my friends, here are the answers. Feel free to work together.